Hello everyone, welcome back to yet another session. Today we're going to discuss about blood. Blood is a specialized connective tissue which is composed of plasma which makes up 55% of the total volume of blood and formed elements which makes up 45% of the total volume of blood. And this 45% of the formed elements mostly constitutes the erythrocytes, that is RBCs. It also contains various other cells like WBCs, which means leukocytes, then thrombocytes, which are platelets. But this 45% cellular fraction is largely made up of RBCs and it is referred to as the hematocrit or the packed cell volume, PCV. Total blood volume is approximately 5 liters, that is 70 to 75 ml per kilogram body weight. This 70 to 75 milliliter per kilogram body weight. Plasma is approximately 55% of the blood volume, that is, it is 90 to 92% composed of water and 7 to 8% proteins, and the remainder of which are made up of other solutes. The formed elements include 45% of blood volume, and by the fraction, RBCs in males is around 5 to 5.5 million per microliter. Then in females, it is 4.5 to 5, and WBC count is 4,000 to 11,000 cells per microliter, and platelet count is 1.5 to 4.5 lakh per microliter. pH of the blood is 7.35 to 7.45, that is, it is slightly alkaline, and the specific gravity is 1.052 to 1.061. Coming towards the functions of blood. So mainly the blood has got transport function, regulatory function, as well as protective function. Under transport function, the respiratory function means blood carries oxygen from lungs to the tissues. That is, this oxygen is bound to hemoglobin. Hemoglobin in the RBCs. So the blood will carry oxygen from lungs to tissues, and it will carry carbon dioxide from the tissues to the lungs. Then the nutritive function is blood transports absorbed nutrients like glucose, amino acids, lipids, and mostly vitamins from the gut to the tissues. So, blood carries glucose, amino acids, lipids, and vitamins from the gut to the tissues. Excretory function is that the blood carries metabolic waste products like urea, creatinine, and uric acid to kidneys or liver for excretion. And the hormonal function is that blood transports hormones from the endocrine glands to the target tissues. The thermoregulatory function is that blood distributes heat generated in the active tissues throughout the body, aiding the temperature homeostasis. So, this is a distribution of the heat which helps in maintaining the homeostasis of temperature. Coming to the regulatory function, blood has got the role in maintaining acid-base balance via the buffer systems. So the buffer systems in the body includes bicarbonate. That means bicarbonate will reduce the acidic environment and will neutralize the pH. Then we have phosphate. as well as protein buffers. So these are the buffers that maintains the acid base balance or maintains the neutrality of the blood. And water is the water balance and osmotic pressure is maintained by the blood via the plasma proteins. And the most important plasma protein is albumin. Okay? So it regulates the water balance via the plasma proteins, that is mainly albumin, as well as electrolytes. And the body temperature is also maintained by the blood via the variable blood flow to the skin. Blood flow to the skin. Now, what is meant by the protective function of blood? Immunity. That is, leukocytes, which are WBCs, and antibodies, they will defend against pathogens. So, the main immune mediating cells here are the leukocytes and antibodies. So, they will help in fighting against the pathogens. And hemostasis is related to blood coagulation and blood clotting. So, here the platelets as well as coagulation factors will prevent excessive blood loss after an injury. Then buffering against pH changes means blood will buffer against acidic environments as well as basic environments and the toxins via the plasma proteins. Now let's have a discussion over the plasma proteins. So earlier here in this session, we already saw that the plasma protein has got a role in buffering against the pH changes. And also here we came across C protein buffers. That is, it has a regulatory function, especially on regulating the water and acid base balance. So, what are plasma proteins? What are its types? The concentration and functions, as well as variations. So, plasma is the fluid or it's the extracellular matrix of blood obtained from removing formed elements. So, formed elements makes up around 45% of the blood. So, when you remove it, we get the plasma. So, it is approximately 90 to 92% of water, with the remainder consisting of plasma proteins and other solutes. So, plasma proteins constitutes around 7 to 8 percentage and other solutes constitutes around 1 to 2 percentage, including electrolytes, that is sodium, potassium, chloride, bicarbonate, calcium, then nutrients like glucose, amino acids, and lipids, nitrogenous waste products like urea, creatinine, uric acid, hormones, and dissolved gases. So, another important question or another important term that we often get confused is serum. Serum is plasma minus the clotting factors. So, by clotting factors, the most important one is fibrinogen that helps in coagulation or clotting. So, when the plasma is devoid of clotting factors, we get the serum. So, the total plasma protein normally ranges from 6.5 to 8 gram per deciliter, and the most of its composition is made up of albumin. So the albumin to globulin ratio is also important. It is 1.2 is to 1 to 1.5 is to 1. Okay. And the functions of plasma proteins are also important. First is the oncotic pressure. So the oncotic pressure is mainly produced by albumin because albumin is the most abundant plasma protein. So, because of its high concentration and molecular number, it maintains the fluid balance between the blood and the interstitial space. So, if there is reduced albumin, okay, that is known as hypoalbuminemia or hyperproteinemia. So, in such a case, this can lead to edema. Okay. So, albumin is the most important plasma protein. Now, buffering function. So plasma proteins acts as buffers against the pH changes. This is also via the protein buffer system. Protein buffer system. Then immunity. This is via the gamma globulins. So what are the gamma globulins? Gamma globulins are the immunoglobulins like IgG, IgA, IgM, IgD, and IgE. So these mediate the humoral immunity. That is the immunity provided or produced by blood. Then the nutritive reserve. That is, these plasma proteins acts as reserve for nutrition, especially albumin. And coagulation. This is mainly by fibrinogen and several other clotting factors, as well as plasma proteins. Then transport. These plasma proteins act as carriers for various substances. So the carrier proteins for hormones like thyroxine binding globulin or transcortin, then lipids, which is carried by the lipoproteins, then metals, transferrin, which carries iron, or copper carried by ceruloplasmin. All these are example. Okay, so the transport of various substances takes place via the plasma proteins. Coming to viscosity, the plasma proteins contributes to blood viscosity and it thereby influences the peripheral resistance and the blood pressure. We have already covered the session on cardiovascular system. So by now you should be having an idea of what peripheral resistance is and what blood pressure is. ESR. ESR, the value of ESR is maintained by the fibrinogen and the globulins. So it promotes the Rolex formation and increases the ESR. And albumin opposes it. Okay, so we'll study about this in detail. So just know that the erythrocyte sedimentation rate is increased by fibrinogen and globulins, and it is opposed by albumin. So the variations in plasma proteins, there can be either an increase in the plasma proteins, which is known as hyperproteinemia. The increase in plasma proteins means there is an increase in the value of plasma proteins or the number of plasma proteins in the blood. Okay, so that is known as hyperproteinemia or hyperglobulinemia. And if the value of plasma proteins are reduced in the blood, that is known as hypoproteinemia. So it is mainly albumin, so it means hypoalbuminemia, which can lead to edema. So hyperproteinemia, it is due to the hemoconcentration. Mainly this hyperproteinemia can occur because of dehydration as well as diarrhea and burns. So if you look at these three, it is very well understood that these are the areas wherein we lose our water and electrolyte from the body. So in such cases, there is hyperproteinemia. That is, there is a saturation of the plasma proteins, thereby increasing the values of plasma proteins in the blood. But water is gone, the electrolytes are gone, so that leads to an increase in the plasma proteins. So this is what is known as relative hyperproteinemia. So there is something known as absolute hyperproteinemia. So this usually occurs in chronic infections, multiple myeloma, then chronic liver diseases, and also in various autoimmune diseases. So two important autoimmune diseases are systemic lupus erythematosus and rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, so if you want, I can write the full form here. Systemic lupus erythematosus, and by RA it means rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, and hyperproteinemia, that is mainly hypoalbuminemia, can lead to edema. So there is decreased synthesis because of various reasons like chronic liver disease. But here it means cirrhosis because of alcoholism or some other factors, and also protein malnutrition. So one protein malnutrition condition is known as kwashiorkor. Perhaps in our chapter on metabolism, or perhaps later, we learn in detail about kwashiorkor and marasmus and these two conditions. So they are important, marasmus and kwashiorkor. But here we'll just learn about their names. Okay. And our next session is on erythrocyte, its morphology, functions, and variation. And along with that, we learn about erythropoiesis and the factors affecting erythropoiesis, which is an important short note, and it can also come as a short essay. So that's all for today's class. We'll see you in the next session. Thank you.